where is the flavor in this? Where is the flavor in this? Like, there's no sugar, there's no spice, there's nothing nice. Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Mina. Welcome to my channel, Mina Reads. And today we're going to be talking about Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy. And I really want to answer the question of why was this book written? So this is going to be kind of like a vlog, I guess, because I'm not finished it yet, but I want to talk about all of my thoughts and feelings as I go through the story. I'm going to talk about a lot of spoilers in this video, but I really want to see like if I can answer the question of why this book was written and what this book is like trying to do, what the aim of the book is, because I know that myself and a lot of my friends, when we heard the news about who the protagonist of the Hunger Games prequel was going to be, we were all like pretty angry about it, that it was going to be about Snow. Snow is the main villain in the original trilogy, and so we were just kind of like, of all characters, why Snow? Why should we care?
I'm supposed to feel sorry for that bitch. I don't.
And you know, it's supposed to be like a villain origin story, but we kind of felt like, why do we care about his villain origin story? We already know that he's a bad person. So why do we care about his origins? I think that a lot of us really had the concern that this book was going to try and validate Snow and try to make us really sympathize with Snow. And I'm at like 40% into this book. And I want to say that I don't think that this book wants you to sympathize with Snow at all. I think, okay, his name is Coriolanus, so I'm going to start calling him that because that's how he refers to himself and everything like that. So Coriolanus, he is like a high school senior and he is really broke. Like, he's dirt poor. Him and his family are really struggling. They used to be a very prominent and rich family in the capital, but in the years after that first rebellion that we hear a lot about in the original trilogy, the capital is very weak and broken, and a lot of the rich, wealthy elites are no longer wealthy because they lost a lot of their money in the war. So Snow's family is very broke at the point that the story starts, and he is trying desperately to figure out a way to increase like his social capital so that will help him to gain like access to the kind of funds that he needs to be able to go to college. So at the start of this story, he has joined this mentorship program in which he is going to be a mentor to a tribute in the 10th annual Hunger Games. So he's going to be a mentor to a tribute, and if he is successful and his mentorship, then he will win a cash prize that he can use to get to university. So that is his goal. He wants to get to university. He needs a way to fund his education, and that's what he's doing. Him being a mentor is the way that he's going to do that. I've seen a lot of people who like already have finished it and really hate it. They think that the story wants you to feel bad for Snow because Snow feels bad for himself. But I don't really think that I don't think that Suzanne Collins wants you to feel bad for him. I think that he feels bad for himself, but she doesn't want you to feel bad for him because, like Snow, he feels bad for himself because he's poor and he doesn't have money, and sometimes his family doesn't have food, they don't have new clothes and things like that. And these are all things that he thinks are like so sad and terrible about his life, and it's all very woe is me. But he fails to realize that he's in a very similar position to a lot of the people in the districts. The districts are also suffering from, you know, hunger, from a lack of supplies and access and money, power, education, all these kind of things. And he doesn't realize that all of this stuff is like the great equalizer. War is basically the great equalizer in this series, and he as a capital citizen is on the same level as some of these people in the districts, and he doesn't realize that. And so I think that this story is trying to show you the kind of delusions that exist in like bigoted society, in an oppressive and supremacist regime, like how deluded you have to be to buy into a system like that. And Snow has fully bought into this delusion that he is better than other people just because he lives in the capital. He feels like his viewpoint is right, but there are a lot of characters in the book that showcase that he's very obviously wrong, and I think that Suzanne Collins is not necessarily trying to validate his viewpoints. If anything, I think all of the characters that surround Coriolanus prove that he is in the wrong and he is the bad person here, and that his viewpoints are very unsafe in how they are leading him to an even darker path of becoming not just like a part of a bigoted and like supremacist society, but having like an active role in shaping his society into being how horrible and fucked up that it is. So it's interesting because as this whole mentorship thing works out, it's kind of like a class project for him and his classmates. Their class project is how to make the Hunger Games better. It's kind of like, it's very strangely, it's like a marketing class. It's like, how can we market the Hunger Games to make them better, to make people more engaged in them? How can we get people to watch the show? How can we get people to spend money on the show? And that's what him and his classmates are trying to do. Him, the Hunger Games is very much like, this is a class project. I need to do well on this so that I can go to college. And it's crazy how he doesn't see that he is a student the same way all of these other tributes should be students, but they don't get this same privilege simply because they don't live in the capital. And he doesn't see them having the same amount of humanity that he does. And I think that the whole book is about the fact that he's wrong. He's wrong because he can't see the humanity in others, even though he is the same as them. They're all teenagers, all trying to have a better life, and he just so happens to live in a place that allows him to maybe forge a better path for himself than the districts. So I would say that, like, with his tribute, Lucy Gray is the District 12 tribute, and I would say that she's like a perfect example of how the narrative cultivates the idea that Snow is just deluded, and he is like very much buying into the delusions of his supremacist society. So him and Lucy are like the same person, and there is like this very gross, weird, like romantic vibe between them, which I really hate personally. I just think it's so ugly and unnecessary. There's kind of like this romantic vibe between them, like almost like they're kindred spirits, because they're like the same person. They are both orphans. Their families were both torn apart by the war. They're both really poor and everything like that. So let's just say, like, not that say that like poverty and like being an orphan is like who you are as a person, but I'm saying that their circumstances in life are very, very similar. But she lives in District 12 and he lives in the capital, and he feels like he is more valid and like he deserves to be planning his future and where he's going to go to college, and Lucy deserves to be going to the fucking Hunger Games, and she deserves to die. And as the story goes on, he kind of feels like more sympathy for her, and he wants her to win the Hunger Games, but he never sits to question, like, should the Hunger Games exist? Is it valid that the Hunger Games exist? Is it valid that the Capitol has decided that they have the power to pull people from the districts and just murder them for amusement? He never questions that. He kind of values Lucy as she exists in relation to him because he starts to like her romantically and he wants to be with her, so he hopes that she will live. But he never sits back and says, is the Hunger Games right? Is the Hunger Games ethical? Should we do the Hunger Games? He never really has these moments. And so I think that that's why the story showcases the fact that he is not a good person, and I don't think that the story wants you to feel like he's a good person. He thinks that maybe he's a decent person with a moral code, but he's not, because there's another character named Sejanus, and Sejanus is one of his classmates. Sejanus is like a recent transplant to the capital. He came from District 2. His family got really rich during the war, and so his family they got so rich that they were able to move to the capital and become capital citizens. And so Sejanus is really existing, knowing that what he knows, that the people who live in the districts are just real and regular people, and they deserve rights too. And so he sees how the capital is so fucked up in their thinking, their mentality. And so he's constantly questioning the systems that exist in the capital that allow the capital and the people in the capital to think that they are better than the districts, and to feel like hosting the Hunger Games is a valid thing to do, a valid thing to continue punishing people for, even though the war has been over 10 years ago. And the people who are they forcing to fight in the Hunger Games were probably children, infants, when the war was happening. They weren't the rebel fighters that the Hunger Games supposedly seek to punish. Sejanus is the one really asking a lot of those moral questions about the ethics of the Hunger Games and why the Hunger Games should exist and why they shouldn't exist. And Coriolanus is constantly thinking about how Sejanus is an idiot and how he thinks Sejanus is too soft. A lot of the factors of this story really go to show that Snow is not correct. Snow is never correct. I feel like all of the characters around Snow are positioned in such a way to throw Snow's like bad mindset into stark relief. Like everything that he does, everything that he thinks, and the very invalid harmful ways of thinking that he has are shown to be bad through the characters around him, through Sejanus's questions of, is it moral, is it ethical, is it right? And then we also have Lucy, and she is this in such a similar position in life to Coriolanus, but he doesn't see that, like, he doesn't perceive how unfair it is if he were to be in the Hunger Games. He doesn't see how it's unfair, how it's not right. He just sees it like, yeah, well, she's gonna have to do it, and hopefully she'll win, and I really like her, so I hope that she is successful in the games. He's very self-centered. He's very narcissistic, and he really does not understand how the system that he exists under is bad and terrible. And also, he has a lot of ideas about how to make the system even worse. And this story is really about how they make the Hunger Games into the large spectacle that we see it as in the original trilogy, because at the moment the games themselves, like the arena, they're basically hosted in like a large like soccer field basically. So it's nothing so elaborate as like, oh, the arena is an island clock, or oh, the arena is this vast jungle. It's nothing so specific and like grandiose as that, and the arena technology is not the way it is in the original series. So this is really about how Snow and his peers and the officials, the game makers and everything, how they go about crafting a games that makes the audience more invested, because people in the capital, they still view the games as kind of a fucked up thing. They kind of see it as like a weird thing, like, oh, you know, we have to do it, but it's weird, it's strange, we probably shouldn't do it. They want to invest the people, the citizens of the capital, in the actions of the Hunger Games, so that they also feel like, oh yay, it's the new Hunger Games, and it's not something that's like sad and tragic and a bit weird and something you don't really talk about. They want the Hunger Games to be a big thing. They want to enforce the conflict between the districts and the capital. They want to maintain that distance, that capital superiority. They want to make the capital feel more involved, more invested. So they introduce like the gambling. They introduce like the sponsorships where sponsors can send food to the tributes. They introduce all this kind of stuff to invest people in it. And they start doing like the interviews where you get to know the tributes and all this kind of stuff. And it basically talks about like the inception of all of those aspects of the games, because prior to all of this stuff that they begin talking about, they treat the tributes like really, really terribly for them. Like Effie in the original trilogy, she really treats Katniss and Peeta like when they are a bit sullen or upset, she makes it seem like she can't understand, she can't fathom why they are not happy that the capital has them in this luxurious train and they can eat all this food and they have these wonderful clothes to wear. And, you know, obviously for Katniss and Peeta, it's like, you know, they're just dressing us up nicely to slaughter us later. And that's like, you know, that is what it is. But in this book, they treat the tributes like literal garbage. They have them all in like this large van in a zoo. They don't feed them, they don't clothe them, they don't allow them to do anything but just sit in this van and be a spectacle. And people come to the zoo to like look at them and like poke and prod them in their cage. It's very gross and uncomfortable. And I think that this, like the gross uncomfortableness of that, the capital wants to kind of alleviate themselves of any feelings of guilt in that way. So that's why later on in the series, we see that the capital makes it like it's this luxurious, once in a lifetime opportunity for these tributes to be treated to all of the fine, grandiose luxury of the capital before they die. So it's like, look, we're doing all this good stuff for you. You should be grateful. Also, it's interesting because like in this book, a lot of the tributes die before they even get to the arena, because a lot of them get sick or they starve. Or also there was like this one thing where a tribute killed a girl in the capital because the girl was like taunting her with food, and so she killed her. So that explains like why later in the series we see that the tributes are kept really isolated and they're in like that, you know, the tribute tower and all that kind of stuff. So I think that it's interesting how you see like a cause and effect between this book and the original trilogy, and like how they shape the games based around these experiences that they're having now with the games. But I personally really don't think that this book needed to be written. I feel like everything that I'm talking about, all of the, you know, like revelations that I would discuss in terms of this story, like all of this shit could be inferred just reading the original trilogy. So I don't necessarily think that we need a story from Snow's point of view. I don't feel like it's necessary. To me, it kind of just feels like a cash grab, like we didn't need it. It was unnecessary. We know that Snow's shitty. We know that bigoted societies believe bigoted shit. We know that the capital supremacy is based on completely arbitrary bullshit. We know all of those things. So I don't feel like this book is necessarily telling us anything new, telling us anything that we didn't know or that you couldn't infer, you couldn't guess on your own. So I don't necessarily feel like this book is like a very necessary step. You know what I'm saying? As a prequel, it really is not answering a lot of questions that I would have loved to have answered. You know, we don't get any like new information about that original rebellion. We don't get any information about the formation of Panem or anything like that, because presumably we're like hundreds of years into the existence of Panem. So it's just like, I feel like as a prequel, I would have liked it to answer some of those kind of questions about the series, and it's not. So it also still, in my opinion, feels like, why are we here? The fact that there's kind of this like romantic relationship between Snow and his tribute is very deeply uncomfortable, because we don't get the girl's point of view. So I don't know how she really feels about him. And I personally, I'm only 46% into the story right now. So my hope is that she just finessing the fuck out of him. Also, I feel like all of the characters very much feel like talking points for a particular ideology. Like, I think that the characters in the original trilogy, they all felt like real people to me, at least from what I remember. They all felt like real people to me, and I feel like in this, the characters don't feel like real people, besides maybe Coriolanus, and he fucking sucks, so obviously I hate him. I just feel like everybody else is filling a role, and they kind of just feel like a caricature and not a character, if that makes sense. They don't feel like a real person with lots of like in-depth thoughts and feelings. I feel like they're all just like a reflection of Coriolanus' society, and they're all meant to be like the antithesis of Coriolanus in one way or another. So I don't know. I feel like all the characters kind of exist in relation to Coriolanus as a foil for who he is as a person, which is a little bit boring, because I feel like in the original trilogy I was actually so invested in a lot of the characters, even the side characters. So it sucks a little bit that I really don't care about any of the people in this. Coriolanus and this girl kissed before she went into the arena. Bitch, what? Spare me the bullshit, please. There's this line where Coriolanus is watching Lucy interact with like another tribute, and they're having like a confrontation, and she, you know, emerges victorious, and he's like, oh, I'm so happy because now I get to keep her, and if she stays alive then I get to keep her. And he like wants her to be like a kept thing, and he keeps talking about how he wants to keep her and admire her, and he wants her to admire him in return. And it's just so weird, because it's very clear to me that he likes her so much because she's so grateful to him, and because she's so reliant on him, and he's into that. And it's just like, it's freaking me the fuck out. Like, I want it to be over. I'm so tired of being in his mind, and I'm like 60% into the story right now. I'm so tired of being in his mind. Like, I want it to be over. I'm sick of him. I'm sick. Like, I'm tired. I'm sick of it. It's so ugly. I hate it here. I hate it here. Anyway, something that I find like really funny about this book is the fact that so many people, when it was announced that this was going to be Snow's story, so many people were like, yeah, that makes sense, because if it was about anybody else, it would just be another retread of the games, and we would just see like somebody else's games, and that would be boring because we already had 2 books about the games. And looky here, all we're talking about is the fucking games from the most boring perspective ever, because Snow himself is not in the games, so we're just watching him watch someone else play the games on a screen, and it's just so boring to be in his perspective, like him, a random high school student, watching other random high school students kill each other, all for him to possibly end up getting a scholarship out of it if his high schooler ends up making it to the end. I really am just like, I wish that this story would have been about a different point in Snow's life if we had to follow Snow. I would have liked to know more about Snow's like climb on the political ladder. The way that Katniss talks about his political career in the original trilogy actually sounds so interesting, and I would have been interested in reading that rather than reading this. I feel like this is just so boring. Like, as the story goes on, it just feels like it's so dragged out, and it's like almost 600 pages. Like, it really does not need to be that long. I can't fathom like what went on that made the story so long, because it's boring. Like, I'm so tired of it, and I think I'm only like 65% in, so there's still so much more to go. I'm just like, what are we doing here? Why am I here? Let me try to go finish this book so we could just talk about it when I finish, because child, yeah, anyway. Where is the flavor in this? Where is the flavor in this? Like, there's no sugar, there's no spice, there's nothing nice. This story is so fucking boring. It's so boring. There's nothing going on. There's nothing about it that's interesting. And now the story is being dominated by this romantic relationship between him and this girl, Lucy. And it's just like, what kind of John Green small town romance bullshit is this? Like, this is not it. This is not it. I really did try to give Suzanne Collins like the benefit of the doubt when it came to this story, because there's definitely a lot of points being made in the beginning of the story. There's a lot of like themes and stuff that I'm picking up on, but like, this story is so boring. This book is almost 600 pages and like nothing really happens, and the part of the story that was about the games feels very short. Like, the games are over. I'm like 70% into the story and the games are over, and we still have all this page time left, and it's just like, what else is going to happen? Like, I just don't care. I don't care about any of it. I'm so bored. I can't fathom, like, I just keep coming back to like the why is this necessary, because I don't feel like it's telling us anything interesting or new. You know what it did tell us? It did tell us the inspiration for the Hanging Tree song. It told us that. We got to see the hanging that inspired the Hanging Tree songs. I mean, shout out to Miss Collins for that one, but I'm just like, why am I here? If there's one thing that Coriolanus Snow has, it's the audacity. The ending of this book really did leave me a little bit shook. I will admit that. I think Suzanne Collins made a few points, but I still have to say that I really do not think that this book is necessary by any means. It didn't do much for me personally. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I do think that thematically it's very interesting. I like the way that all the characters are like foils for different aspects of Coriolanus's like personalities. I feel like that's an interesting thing. I feel like the way that Suzanne Collins like constructed those aspects of the story, like on the character level and on the themes of the story, was very well done. But as a plot, literally nothing happens, nothing interesting goes on. I mean, there's things that happen. There's like some weird experimentation going on, a bit of a mad scientist vibe. We get to see Coriolanus train to be a peacekeeper and live in District 12 for a while. Things happen, but not interesting things, not things that make me feel like, wow, and now I know Snow so much better. I feel like you get to know who Snow is reading the first chapter of the book, and then everything else after that is just like too much. It's just, we don't need it. Who cares? The answer is not me. I didn't care. It was very difficult to read this book because for such a large portion of it, I feel like nothing interesting happens, and I feel like The Hunger Games is interesting because it provides, like the Hunger Games series, it provides like action, and it brings up all these questions and moral dilemmas as action is happening. But in this series, or in this book, in the series rather, I feel like nothing happens. We're always in these moments of stasis where Snow is just sitting around thinking about things, and it's just boring. It's overwhelmingly boring. The finale scene though in this book, not the very last scene with Coriolanus and that guy, the guy who created the Hunger Games, that shit was kind of whack and we all been knew. But I think that the scene, his final scene with Lucy, Suzanne Collins' mind. The girl and Coriolanus are plotting to run away together. And Coriolanus is only going to run away with her because some events have happened that implicate him in a murder. And by some events, I mean that he murders someone. So he can no longer like keep his job as a peacekeeper because he thinks that someone's going to find out about this stuff. And also he led to his friend Sejanus getting murdered, mostly because Sejanus was never his friend. He just was like finessing the fuck out of Sejanus and all of Sejanus's money and Sejanus's mom's like desserts. so he never really cared about Sejanus anyway. And he got Sejanus killed, and he also murdered somebody. And so since he almost was going to get caught for murdering someone, he was going to run away with the girl Lucy. And Lucy figured out that he murdered someone else that she didn't know about, and she was like, oh shit, so he a murderer for real. I think I'm gonna have to dip. So she like runs away from him, and I think that their final confrontation is like, well, it's not really a confrontation, but that final moment where he's like chasing her through the woods is so scary, is so eerie, and I think it really shows how Snow is just so sick, and he doesn't even realize how sick he is, how he went from literally moments prior to when he's hunting her down in the woods. He was like, I'm in love with you, we're running away together, I'm so happy to be with you. And like that, he's hunting her through the woods. It's just like, that was a moment. That was a moment in literature history, to be honest. Definitely a bit iconic. I will give Suzanne Collins that. But everything else, I feel like this story it was unnecessary. She definitely is, you know, riding my tears all the way to the bank, because she sure as shit is going to make a fuck ton of money off this book. And I'm pretty sure I heard something about there's going to be a movie for it, so she is going to be living high on the hog, and she don't give a fuck about my opinion. But I really do not think that she needed to write this shit. I just really don't. So that's really my opinion. My opinion is this book is highly unnecessary. I think it deals with a lot of the same interesting themes that The Hunger Games deals with, but from the point of view of an entirely insufferable protagonist. And I think that if you want to read this, you should just reread the original trilogy and you will be fine. So that's all I have to say on this. This video is a bit weird. I feel like I'm a bit low energy, and I'm sorry about that. I haven't slept in like 3 days, and I feel like I might be sick. I don't think I'm actually sick. It's probably allergies. Hopefully it's allergies. But yeah. So I'm sorry if this video is not what you usually expect from me. But I hope you cared at least a little bit about my thoughts on this. Let me know what your thoughts on this book is. Did you read it? Are you gonna read it? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? I don't know. Let me know. I would love to hear all about it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Also, thank you for 4,000 subscribers. I don't know if I mentioned that yet on my channel, but we reached 4,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. I love you all, and I will see you all in my next video. Okay, bye.